You all are builders. You all are builders. So I want to share with you a story about what builders do. What builders do. Back in 2016 and 2017, as I was playing with the Chicago Bears, some of y'all may remember Colin Kaepernick had been taking a knee along with Eric Reed, one of his teammates, some other guys across the NFL, in protest of police brutality in America. I was one of the starting outside linebackers for our team. We didn't have a social justice committee just yet, but for whatever reason, guys seemed to look at me for answers. And there were some comments made at the time by someone high in political office, and everyone in our facility, everyone in our building was up in arms. We were upset, we were frustrated, we were angry. And at that moment, we said, man, we're all gonna go and take a knee and we're gonna do something and I can't believe and all these things, right? Well, that was a Saturday before our game on Sunday. So as you all know, you all work with teams, we have the team meetings, you travel. That was Saturday morning, we got on our plane, we traveled to go play the team we were gonna go play. And I actually just went to our hotel. It was a home game. And we had just finished our team chapel. And I walked out of the chapel the night before the game, and all of a sudden I get cornered by three individuals. John Fox, the head coach of our team at the time, Ryan Pace, the general manager of our team, and George McCaskey, the chairman or the acting owner in a lot of ways of the Chicago Bears. I get cornered by these individuals, and I've never been a guy to have deep conversations with these guys in leadership, so I thought I was going to be released from the team at that time. I was like, I didn't do anything, guys. I don't know what happened. It wasn't me, it was him. And they said, Sam, we have a quick question for you. What are you all going to do tomorrow during the national anthem? This is the height of all the protests and confusion, and what are you all going to do tomorrow during the national anthem? You heard this story of being the story to telling the story. I was in the story. I was in the midst of it. I had no idea. And I told them, I said, I don't know, but let me ask the guys on the team what they need to do. But I do know this, and I said this to George McCaskey, the chairman of our team, a man in a position of leadership, a guy who never shows up to these meetings, but he was there today. I said, well, whatever we do, we need to know that you have our backs. We need to know that you support us, that you are for us, that you are with us. Those who don't know George, he's a quiet, soft-spoken leader, but he listened, he nodded his head, and we proceeded to our team meeting. In that team meeting, George McCaskey, the leader, the chairman of the team, who never comes to these meetings, he spoke and he said, this is what I would prefer that you all do. He said, we play at Soldier Field and we're one of the most historic franchises. I'd prefer if everyone stood and put their hands over their hearts. Like, that's what I would prefer. But I understand a lot of you all are frustrated and upset. So whatever you do, just do it together. That was his only ask. Whatever you do it together. And so we left that meeting, and as some of you all know, we leave these meetings. Usually we'll go to the dining area, we'll eat, and we'll laugh, and we'll joke. Well, this time there was no eating and laughing and joking. There was just talking and trying to figure out what should we do and where do we go. I had guys from Tennessee, a black teammate from Tennessee who played for the St. Louis Rams at the time when Trayvon Martin was killed. And some of his teammates, they walked up, hands up, don't shoot. Some of y'all remember that? And he didn't. And he said, I didn't do something then, I have to do something now. I had other teammates from Pensacola, Florida, a white guy named Josh, a huge 6'3", 350. And he said, hey, where I'm from, I put my hand over my heart. That's what I do, that's where I'm from, that's what I'm doing. What do you do? For whatever reason, I had been put in a position of leadership to help guide this this team, this ship. And no, I wasn't a captain. I wasn't on any committee, but I had been given trust to help make a decision. And during that time, we met and we talked and we met and we talked, heard story after story after story. Went to sleep that night not having an answer, walked to the locker room the next day, and all of a sudden, all the guys look at me and said, Sam, what are we doing? After some conversations with some guys on different teams, time in prayer as well, personally, I said, we're locking arms. We're staying together, and we're locking arms. We went out and we won the game, and it was a little bit hard, right? Because there were some boos from the fans, and some were cheering. It could have been a very divisive moment. The other team had a lot of disarray, and so we came back after that game, and once again, in the locker room, and George McCaskey, the chairman of the team, the leader, person in a position of power, makes a beeline to me. And this time I knew I was done. I'm going to get cut now. The season's over. I'm sorry. Like, it was only week 3. It was his idea, right? He makes a beeline to me. He puts his hand out and says, Sam, I'm so proud of the way you handled that. But I don't want this to be the last time we have these kinds of conversations. If you're serious about making change, come up to my office and let's talk. And I did. Sometimes we think we have to be in positions of power and influence to make change, where all we really need is to be a listening ear. All we need to be is a mouthpiece for others, or a vessel to be used. Kind of talked a little bit yesterday about our different roles and objectives and our different job descriptions. And what I'm here to remind you of is that you are so much more than your job description. So I went up to his office, and George McCaskey, this 65-year-old white guy, is talking with this 30-something-year-old black guy. Got an owner, got a player, got a member of the ownership group. I'm a union representative, right? And we're having conversations about justice, about hope, about love, about race, about hatred, confusion, fear, having these conversations. We turned those conversations into action. I took a police ride along with him to the south side of Chicago. We also visited a couple different prisons just to get a good idea of like just justice systems in general and how people are view life, because we sometimes put ourselves in these bubbles. We have this dream of living in a certain neighborhood and having our kids in certain schools and making a certain amount of money. We don't realize that all those things, while are good and with intent, they can put you in a certain bubble, both good and bad. And so we kind of spent our time bursting these bubbles. Player, owner, black, white, union, management. Weaving the playing field. A few years after that, some of y'all may remember, actually not too long ago, right around 2 years ago, I finished my time with the Bears. I had gone to, it was after the story of all the injuries and being released. I went with Tampa Bay, played with the Bucs for a little bit, and I had gotten back to, I was actually in Arizona training when George Floyd got killed. From being in the story to telling the story. And I was frustrated, I was confused, I was upset. So many people had all these different emotions. And I got a call from a friend who said, Sam, you have to do something. Why me? What are you talking about? I have to do something. Sam, you have relationships with people all around sports, not just in the NFL, but you know guys in the MLB, the MLS. Like, you have relationships, the NBA, you have to do something. And so I was actually on my way driving back from Arizona back to Chicago. My wife had my wife's from Nigeria, and she was getting her citizenship, about to get it, so we had to go back for our appointment. And as I was driving, I was contemplating what to do. This is my chance to show up and to step up and to do something, and actually called up a nonprofit leader in Chicago, and I said, hey, what do you need? There's rioting and protesting, and we were watching stuff on the news, but also working in the media, so I know sometimes that stuff isn't always all the way real. I said, what do you need? Because we're ready to do whatever. We could tweet at the president. We could go and protest. We could, whatever you need, we'll do it. And she said, Sam, all that our kids need, she works with kids on the west side of Chicago and the south side of Chicago. She said, Sam, all that our kids need is someone to listen to them. Somebody to sit with them. These are black and brown kids who feel like they're forgotten about. So really, they just need you to show up. And show up, we did. Me and some guys, some of y'all names you may not know. I may not, guys who played for the Cubs and the Bulls and the Chicago Sky and the White Sox and the Blackhawks and the Bears showed up to the west side of Chicago. We left our neighborhoods, because we don't live on the west side or the south. We live up in close to the facility, right? Left our neighborhoods and we showed up. And we heard frustration, sure. Fear, sadness. We had some police officers there as well, some of the kids, some of the pro athletes. Got in these things called listening circles, healing circles, had conversations, which were really important. But more than that, we took what we called just a tour. Got on a bus and took a tour of the west side of Chicago. We wanted to see if what we were seeing on the screens, on TV was really real. This looting and the rioting, is it really real? What's really going on? And as we drove through those neighborhoods, yes, we saw buildings boarded up. We saw glass on the ground. But what else we saw was actually a little bit more disturbing. I was sitting with Jason Hayward, he plays for the Cubs, and we were on this bus, and I said, hey, Jason, on our 15-minute, we've been driving for about 15 minutes at the time. So in our 15 minutes so far, how many grocery stores have you seen? Driving around, how many have you noticed? He said, I don't know, maybe one. I said, okay, great. How many liquor stores have you seen in this neighborhood? He said, over 10. So we realized, okay, there's an issue here that a lot of us had been ignoring. We've been negligent. We hadn't even known that, yes, like looting and rioting and all these things, but there are people in the community with no food. At least no healthy food. We met with the kids again the next week. We said, hey, where do you get your food from? These are 13 and 14-year-old kids. We said, where do you get your food from? They said, well, if we want food, we go to McDonald's or the gas station. I get McDonald's, right? McDonald's fast food, but like, where do you get your healthy food from? Like, if you want to get healthy food, where do you get it from, right? Find a need. We saw a problem. We're trying to get to the bottom of it, right? We're trying to evaluate. We're seeing what's presenting or try to ask questions. Where do you get your healthy food from? They said, Sam, if you want healthy food, we have to drive 45 minutes to the next city to get something healthy or organic. On that bus ride the week earlier, as we noticed what we noticed, we pro athletes, it was COVID, so there was no sports being played, everything had just been canceled. We said, what if we could do something? What if we could maybe purchase one of these liquor stores and turn it into a food mart? What if we could just, I know I'm not in the business world. I know I'm not in the nonprofit world. I have this platform, though. What if I could do something? And so that's why we met, like I said, with the kids next week. Where do you get your food from? They said where they got it from. Where do you get healthy food from? They explained the process. Then we said, okay, would you want like a food mart in your community? A place to get healthy food? They said, Sam, we would love that. And so with that, conversation was birthed. The athletes raised some money. The kids led the charge. And we turned this place that was once a food desert. Right, statistically speaking, there were 2 grocery stores and 17 liquor stores in a half-mile radius. We turned something that was a food desert into, for lack of better terms, a food oasis. The kids called it Austin Harvest, right? The neighborhood's called Austin. So we built this facility that provides fresh food and community in a neighborhood that was forgotten. I got a chance to be a part of the story. But now on the outside looking in, I'm wondering, okay, what are ways that I can maybe tell the story? I'm not playing anymore. Yes, I'm based out of Chicago, but I'm traveling a good bit for work. What if I could remind people that they could be a part of their stories as well? There's a story in the Bible actually about this guy named Nehemiah who heard about his city. The walls had been broken down, and he felt this calling to go and build it, to rebuild the walls. He had seen an issue, and he said, what if I could do something about it? And so he gathered some guys. He went and tried to rebuild these walls of his city. But as he's trying to rebuild the walls, he's getting laughed at, getting made fun of, getting ridiculed, threatened for his life. But he continued to show up. He continued to show up. He actually went with a friend by the name of Azaria, and all this name matters. You'll hear why in a second, to help him rebuild these walls. And despite all the hurtful remarks and threats, they rebuilt the walls. Well, Azaria is also the name of a friend of mine. Austin Harvest, that food mart that you heard about, that bus tour I told you with these athletes who were on. Well, not only were there athletes from all these different teams, there was a young girl on that bus who lived in this neighborhood in Chicago. This young girl, about 13 or 14 years old, she saw us kind of looking in this new environment and wondering, man, what's going on? I don't live here, and I didn't know it was this bad, and I never heard about this, never saw about this, never knew these issues existed. This young girl's on this bus, and she's watching us observe and talk about liquor stores and food marts and all these things. And as we're going through this neighborhood, she says, hey, I got a quick comment I want to make to you pro athletes, 13, 14-year-old girl, black girl. She said, some of y'all may view this as a field trip, driving to this side of town and checking it out and learning more. He said, but some of us choose to live here. We call this place home. So I hope you'll remember that when you go back to your homes. What does it mean to be a builder? This young girl on the bus, her name is Azaria as well. She's a builder. And I think the point I want to make to you all is as you all go and build, as you all fight against whether it's social constructs, right? Or whether it's even playing in the NFL, right? Being a woman in the NFL. One of my closest friends, she works with the Bears. We were talking a week ago from today, last week Sunday, and she was saying, I was hoping they would fire me. Because when I show up, some of the people in that building, this is not inclusive to the Bears, this is a lot of different teams. She said, they don't even look me in the eye. I'm no longer allowed to go to meetings. I'm overlooked. I'm super qualified. This woman worked for Olympic teams, helped people win golds and championships. They don't even look me in the eye. There are certain glass ceilings, we talk about those things, certain barriers and restrictions people who look like me, right? For women as well, being honest. Doors that oftentimes are closed. What if we could be the people to open those doors? I was reading something online yesterday that said that 85% of the things that we fear never end up really happening. I think sometimes we fear opening up these doors. Well, if I open up the door to them, then what happens to me and my job and my role and my responsibilities? And I have all these things, I don't have time, and what's going to happen? It's fear. It's not real. What if we could be people to open up those doors? I think back to George McCaskey, as I mentioned, the chairman of the Bears. And some of y'all who keep up with sports, there's something called the Rooney Rule, right? And having more African-American coaches, coaches of color, minority coaches in the coaching ranks. So they made this rule that said you have to interview 2 minority candidates. Now it's actually included 2 female candidates as well before you make a hire. And just a few days ago, we saw a former coach of the Tennessee Titans say that, hey, there's a situation that arose a few years ago where I knew I was going to get the job. Ownership had told me I was going to get the job. And they still went out and interviewed these candidates, and I sat there knowing they had no chance. What do you do when you're caught in the crux of a decision? We often talk about leadership and integrity, talk about what it means to manage people well, to love people well, but oftentimes we're caught in the crux of these decisions instead of stepping up, standing up, and leaning in, we step away. I think oftentimes we step away because of fear. What I'm here to remind you of is that, number one, when you build, when you see an issue, when you address an issue, there will be ridicule. Criticism is the cost of praise. But what you build, what you do for somebody else that is behind you, it could possibly change the world. I believe that change starts with you. Let's put it that way. We just cut right to the point. We don't need systems or structures or things built. Change starts with you, right? Rooney Rule hiring. George McCaskey's the owner. He could hire who he wants to hire. We don't need systems, interview processes. Change starts with you. That friend who I told you about, who saw me crying, saw me in tears, saw me and said, hey man, it's good to see you. That same friend has been helping open up doors for me for opportunities I never would have gotten. He saw some of these invisible walls and ceilings, said, I'm going to break them down, Sam, for you. Why? Because I believe in you. I'm for you. I love you. So as I close, I want to encourage some people who are in positions of leadership and power and influence. Change starts with you. The change that you read about, the statistics that we all know, starts with you. Lean in, get close, listen. Some of our minority people in this space, black people in this space. I work with the NFLPA, as y'all know. We were like, man, we want more black representation. We want more, black doctors and nurses and surgeons. We want them to represent us. And someone in the NFLPA said, well, they don't exist. We don't know where they are. And I'm looking in this room, and I'm seeing a lot of them, a lot of us. We need you. And lastly, as I close, to some of the women in this space, in a male-dominated space, I couldn't imagine what you go through on a daily basis. Couldn't imagine how you feel being overlooked, being passed up. I know that there's deep, deep ridicule and sometimes feelings of shame. Am I enough? What more do I have to do? If I could just encourage you, keep on carrying your torch. There are people who you'll never meet who are looking at you, up to you, and through you, and you're providing hope for them. So don't be discouraged. Know that ridicule will come, stones will be thrown, even as you do the right thing. Like all the stuff we talked about yesterday, as you do the right thing, it's not going to look pretty. Be encouraged. You are opening up doors. You are paving ways for people you could never imagine. Build, 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 build. Listen, lean in, and keep on building. Thank you.